Welcome to Veteran Resource Podcast, where you will meet nonprofit organizations focused on improving the lives of veterans and their family members. Here is your host, Jeremy Paris.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 57 of the Veteran Resource Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Paris, and I'm really excited about bringing you the first interview of the season. Today, we have Paul Riedner on from the Veteran Resilience Project. And this episode is really, really important. I think that everybody needs to please pass this on to everybody that you know. We need to get as many veterans as possible to hear about what Paul has to say. And I'm curious, how many people out there are liking this new format of having 5 episodes per week? I know we're only on episode 3 for the week, but what do you think so far? Do you like the first 2? Do you like what we're doing here? Let me know. Jump into the Facebook group, which you can get to by going to veteranresourcepodcast.com/community. And that is going to redirect you to the Facebook page. And you can request to join the group, and I'll approve you. You could jump in, and we can get the conversation going. I'd love to hear what you think of the new format and also what you think of this episode. And speaking of this episode, Paul Riedner is the executive director of a startup nonprofit called the Veteran Resilience Project, which uses EMDR to address a number of after effects of military service and war. Paul has an economics degree and an MBA focused on business anthropology and consumer behavior. From 2006 to 2010, he was a deep sea diver in the U.S. Army. Since returning from war and the military, Paul began exploring how to use art to express his changing perspectives and to connect the public with the experiences, triumphs, and struggles of returning veterans. Paul produces a podcast called ResilienceMN, that's MN as in Minnesota, that interviews veterans and serves as the community outreach mechanism for VRP. All right, we are going to jump right into this amazing episode. Paul, welcome to the Veteran Resource Podcast. How you doing tonight?
Great, man. How's it going?
Things are going pretty well. So I wanted to start out with kind of just a short description of what the Veteran Resilience Project, what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to understand it is we give a trauma therapy called EMDR to any veteran or currently serving National Guard or reservist in Minnesota for free using a network of independent trauma therapists all across the state of Minnesota.
Gotcha. Very cool. Okay, we're going to get into that, doing a deep dive, but first I kind of want to get a little bit of your background. So can you kind of tell us about who you are and a little bit of your backstory?
Sure. I'm a contrarian, so I've done a whole bunch of things and taking the path less traveled quite often. So I'm from Minnesota, grew up playing a lot of sports. Basketball was my main love. And after going to undergrad at Carleton College, I sort of got my mind blown by all the smart people down there in Northfield, Minnesota. And after that, I sort of started to explore the world. I taught in China for a year. I was an exchange teacher with my hometown's sister city program. And so we swapped teachers. So I did that for a year. And after that, I moved to Chicago when I got back to the States. My first significant real cultural shock was moving from China back to the States and back to a small town. And
oh, wow.
In China, I was in a town of small town of like 1 million. Like one of maybe 6 or 7 foreigners. It was quite an experience. So yeah, when I got back, I was sort of figuring out where I fit in best. And so I made the move to Chicago with a guy I played football with in college. And I learned how to be a trader on the Chicago Board of Trade floor, doing soybean options and future trading.
Wow.
Yeah, so I did that for a few years, and that led me up to 2006, where I put everything on hold, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? I need something different. And so I wasn't going to take any options off the table, and ended up enlisting in the U.S. Army at that point.
Wow. Wow. So I want to circle back real quick. You mentioned you had culture shock coming back from China, but you didn't have it going to China?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose I did have some on the other end of that. But it's one of those deals. I think it's very similar to coming back from the Army back into civilian life, because you go through a lot of difficult things and you're challenged in many ways, and you have to kind of build a new self-image,
Gotcha.
and then you have to adjust and
Yeah,
do
that
all,
whole rediscovery.
yeah, and those happen over time. Like, say, for my 4-year career in the Army, but in that same year in China, those things were happening incrementally the whole time. I don't realize they're happening until I get back home. And all of a sudden I'm back where I grew up, but I'm very different. Not very different, right? But I have a lot of things have happened since then.
Right.
And all of a sudden I was seeing this stark contrast between this, culture and society in China, and then the one that I knew very well at home. And people didn't know all those things that I had gone through, right? I'm just Paul from Red Wing, who was acting a little odd. And, I was actually speaking English super slowly because I had to when I was in China. Like, why are you talking so slow, man? So yeah, it was a definite culture shock. Definitely. It was interesting. I mean, even in the time that I left, I noticed the TV was more violent, more sex than when I had than before I had gone to China. While I was there, we invaded Iraq, and I was in a position where I was being asked a lot of questions about why we were going to Iraq. So I had to do my best and explain to them what our current, at that time, understanding of the justification for the war. And that's a good exercise to go through. And because at that point I was against going into Iraq.
Right.
So, but I still had to explain the other side, and because that's a really good exercise for people to do. But I was walking to a market in China one time after the invasion, or shortly after, and a lady there asked my interpreter where I was from, and when he said America, she was like, well, "Why isn't he in Iraq? This young man, what's he doing in China?" And I was like, "Whoa!" It kind of blew me back a little bit.
Huh.
And then 3 years later, I'm signing up for.
Wow. So what was life like in the military for you?
So it was tough. I mean, I was a deep sea diver for the Army. We had a really high washout rate before we went to AIT down in Panama City, and so it was, the training was tough. I was with a lot of great guys, just high achievers, who I still stay in touch with a lot. And then we were constantly on the move doing missions around the U.S., like to all the locks and dams and, U.S. Army Corps of Engineer facilities all over the place. And then, all over the world, the Mediterranean, Persian Gulf, Oman, Iraq, Kuwait, Germany. So it was good work. And I think, it's just like anything. It's not all good. It's not all bad. It's just, you learn some stuff. I don't really ever believe in regrets, unless I'm dead. It was the most challenging thing I'd ever done. And I think now I'm operating with a different perspective on life. I understand intuitively what's important and what's not, or at least have a better gauge on that, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty common with vets, like some stuff just doesn't seem to mean as much as it did before, and some things mean more.
Right. And so when you transitioned out, was that difficult for you? Was that like when you came back from China?
Yeah, it was. Luckily, I immediately went into business school at the University of Minnesota. Really within the week that I returned back to Minneapolis. So I was instantly had some structure around me. I had a squad around me, you know, new classmates, and I had had something to really keep me occupied. So I think my reintegration was really sort of spread out around those 2 years of that program. And I did struggle. Like at first, it was sort of like I was more quiet than I was normally. I didn't know how to even articulate my opinions on things, even though I knew that they were different than they had been. And then I was trying to look at things through a business lens all of a sudden with a lot of people that just didn't have the same life experiences that I had, and not one to think that my way is right, but when you don't see a lot of other maybe perspectives alongside you, it takes a little bit more courage to speak up,
Right.
and own that, and not be like, well, maybe they're not going to get this, or maybe I don't quite get it yet or something. So, but over that 2 years, I started using art to express my beliefs and my things that have changed, using writing and making an audio show and a short documentary, and starting to work in the veteran space.
Interesting. And I kind of want to hear the origin story of the Veteran Resilience Project. Was it at that time that you were already thinking about starting that?
Well, I was working as a community organizer in Minneapolis when I had an article that got printed up in the newspaper. It was an op-ed. A founder of Veteran Resilience Project, her name is Elaine Nguyen, and she's a trauma therapist. Her husband is a Vietnam vet. So he reached out to me at that point, and I started to work with, in some of their projects. So Elaine actually started VRP in 2012 with a pilot project, 30 vets over a 2-year period, and got some phenomenal results. 74% of these veteran clients no longer qualify as having PTSD.
Wow.
Using the post-traumatic checklist.
74%?
Yeah. And 100% have significantly reduced symptoms. So these are big numbers. And when they recruited me after this was done, this pilot project, they went through the official process of incorporating and then filing with the IRS to get 501c3 status and then installing a board. And so they recruited me to be on that board. And the more I learned, like these results, these outcomes, and then I just kept reading, and the founder, Elaine, would just keep, leaving behind a book that might be useful for me to know. At this time, I was an independent consultant, like a freelance consultant, and I just like new projects and digging in, going really, really quick at a new area and learn as much as you can, as quick as you can. And I just naturally started doing that in this space. And soon after that, I just wrote up a proposal because I knew these numbers, they couldn't lie about those numbers. And I'm looking at the Minnesota National Guard at this point had the highest suicide rate in the country. And yet have this trauma therapy that they're not using at the VA. And most people haven't never heard about. And I'm like, well, let's not creep along and act like there's no urgent matter here. I'd be willing to go and be the first executive director and see if we can accelerate the progress that we can make so we can get this in the hands of vets as soon as possible. And so that's what we've been doing since August of last year. I've been doing it, actually as the executive director for just over a year now.
And your background lends itself perfectly to stepping in there and being able to run with this. That's great.
Yeah, it was a really good fit for everyone, I think.
And so the EMDR, you've brushed upon that a little bit, but I'd like you to kind of define that a little bit more and kind of go into how that actually helps veterans.
Yeah, so it's a trauma therapy, so it's similar to what you would get at the VA or maybe in a private facility, but it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a mouthful. And what it does is it's different than some of the alternatives in that it's not just something that is a conversation. It's not like talk therapy where the only thing that's happening is talking about it and getting feedback on how you're thinking about a traumatic event or something that's, bothering you or blocking you. Well, this actually uses the body's natural intelligence, a natural way of healing in this counseling session. So if you think about at the end of the day and when you go to bed at night, and then eventually you'll get into that REM sleep.
Right.
Right. And that's the rapid eye movement. And so what we think is happening, and it's probably, kind of a crude way to think about it, but it's this REM sleep is integrating what all the events of today into who you are as a person. So it's all integrated into yourself. And so we know that there's a strong connection between the eyes and the mind. And so what they've discovered with this process is you can kind of recreate those same conditions when you're taking someone through a traumatic memory, so that you can use it with the eyes, similar to it looks like a hypnotism sort of thing, where your eyes will be following either a light bar or a wand or a finger at a certain pace from left to right, while you're getting coached on, the feelings that you're having in your body. And it's this really incredible process of actually attaching all parts of yourself. So you're attaching your body back to your brain through your limbic system. So you're being coached on what your body's telling you in terms of if you're feeling pain or uneasiness around your body, because there's an intelligence there. And then they're asking questions, to use your analytical mind to put numbers on things. And there's this 8-step process that sounds complex, but it really isn't. And it gets the mind in the place where it can open up that memory so your brain can process it properly, instead of just storing that stuff away and having it fester and trigger when it shouldn't be.
Wow.
So that's EMDR. I mean, it's supposed to be offered in the VA. There's 4 top tier trauma therapies that are recommended for treating PTSD, but the VA is only using the ones that they created internally by their researchers. And those are cognitive processing therapy and then prolonged exposure. And
why do you think they're not using this one? If it has a 74% positive rating, it's kind of insane.
Yeah, I mean, it fumes me to no end. But it's one of those things, they can't do everything. And then the other part is that because they've developed them internally, like in terms of like resource allocation for an organization, it makes sense for them to just focus on just 1 or 2 modalities instead of others. But now we're at the point where there's so much research. It's a mountain of research showing this effectiveness rating. And then the other part of that is the ones they offer have a higher dropout rate. So, if you talk about trauma therapies, everyone talks about effectiveness rating, but that's ignoring those that can't make it through the process, through the program. And they have really high dropout rates. And to me, that's putting vets in a bad position when there's a known high dropout rate, and yet we're still putting them through this process that the evidence is showing is not, it's just not good enough.
Right. Wow.
So, but there are really good developments since I've been working, and I don't know how this all fits in, but we have been in contact with the top mental health policy advisor in Washington at the head VA office, who's tasked with ensuring that all veterans get access to EMDR at any VA point of care. And it's happening within the next 3 to 6 months. At least the orders are coming down the line. This is a huge, huge win for veterans everywhere. And I encourage any veterans that are listening to this, if you go in to any mental health counseling session or whatever it is, and you're not satisfied, with what you have, or you want to know all the options, just ask them about EMDR. And they're going to eventually, some facilities offer it, because every facility is their own little fiefdom. but most don't. But real in short order, it's going to be, hey, if you ask for EMDR, they're going to either have to refer out to someone who does provide it, or they're going to have the internal capabilities to provide it. So it's really like, get to know this term and ask for it.
And so if they're inside of Minnesota, that's pretty much the area that you guys cover, so they can come to you specifically for EMDR. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can. And so the other thing that about our program that's as unique, and it's been created to address this need, is that because of the stigma of mental health and PTSD, let's say like someone who served in the Guard, like what do we expect them to do? Go to their superiors and say like, I need help with my, I have a problem. I think I need some help for PTSD. Well, that's going to jeopardize a lot of things, even though, formally, there's not supposed to be any
repercussions
exactly for doing that. But we know that that's just not the case. There just are,
Right.
And so we offer 100% confidentiality. Every veteran is assigned a number. So when we do our outcome management, all those results are just a client number, and they don't go back to the Guard. They don't go to the VA, right? And that's been one reason why when vets hear about us, they're like, okay, well that alleviates at least one of my concerns right off the bat.
Are you guys looking to expand outside of Minnesota?
Yeah, absolutely. But we're such a young organization right now. I'm fighting tooth and nail to get a secure funding source. And those, that's a slow process, but we're making progress. And right now, like I've been working for free for much of the first year. We've had one foundation step in and help me out because they believed in what we were doing and the way that I was approaching it. So if she hadn't done that, I call her my angels. That's Suzanne Koplinger with the Catalyst Initiative. She just swooped down out of nowhere. I had no idea, and quickly had some meetings and was like, we want to make sure that you can continue doing this. And so there's some other likely sources of funding that have been blocked because of this this habit that people have of deferring to an authority on medical issues or veteran issues. Mm-hmm. So these people would go to the VA to ask, well, we have this project that we're thinking about. They've applied for funding. What do you know about EMDR? Well, then they're not going to get a good answer when you go to the folks that refuse to offer it.
Right. And that really doesn't make sense to me, because it's not like you guys are in competition. You guys are both you both have the same aim. You're trying to help veterans. And, just because you're not doing it the way that they're doing it doesn't mean that they shouldn't acknowledge the fact that you're helping. And in most cases, it's working much better than what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, the politics of it all is sickening, man. Like when I'm in business school and I'm looking at like case studies of, corporations, mm-hmm. Then like, hey, great competition, fight to the better end, cook your books, do whatever you got to do to win. It's sort of like the business environment.
Right.
Sounds bad, but that's what's happening. I mean, that sort of environment in the business world is what's happening even in this like veteran space. And it irks me to no end that someone is going to play some sort of defensive, protective game because because of whatever they need to hold their job at the VA, or everyone's under their own pressures.
Right.
And some people can't easily, understand what a sunk cost is, and decide to make a move in a better direction. No, they look at it like, I've been doing this for 15 years. I am not going to help some new thing come through here. And now all of a sudden I got to find a new job, or now I got to learn something new, and I'm not saying that this is like, I'm really careful about assigning malice to someone else's intentions.
Right.
They make decisions, and I don't know what that world is. But when it comes down to it, we have a suicide rate that's just through the roof. And then we also have exorbitant a number of veteran organizations and corporations that are marketing to veterans, and more money going into the VA every day, yet that number is not coming down. Or maybe it is a little bit, So it's like the business of helping veterans, just it's not a business. We should all be trying to get out, like,
Right.
try to put ourselves out of work. Because if we all did our job helping vets, or not even helping vets, I don't even like that language, but just getting a vet back on track, that should be a short-term career for us.
Right.
So yeah, so there is this landscape that I've discovered, of turf battles and sort of I don't know, I guess you'd call it like a scarcity mindset.
Right. Well, there are some positives on that side, where I see organizations all the time, since I'm interviewing them on a regular basis. I see organizations collaborating together many times, and some are large and some are small. So there are examples where there isn't that scarcity mindset, and usually those organizations that are collaborating are doing well because of that.
Yeah.
But you're right. There are some of those organizations that kind of feel like, well, if somebody is, donating to that other organization, then that's less money that we're getting. And it's just not the case. If everybody has the same goal in mind, then collaboration should be where it's at.
And the fact is, like, it's hard to, thank God that you're doing what you're doing. Because there's so many options that as a vet, that you got to do a lot of work to figure out where you're going to go, what you qualify for, and what's worthwhile. And eventually, hopefully, those organizations that are aligned, and have that right mindset, start to collaborate more and improve the services and lower the bar for a vet to figure out, okay, who do I trust here?
Absolutely. And also, I actually have been invited a few times over to the veteran roundtable meetings with Congress, and your representative, Walls.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorites up there. Every time I go to DC, that guy is incredible. And I sat down with him a couple of months ago, and at the last meeting, I brought up all of these alternative methods that people are using that are helping, doing equine therapy and, athletic therapy and music therapy, art therapy. There's these other things that we're seeing positive results from, and, studies are showing that it's helping. And now it's not a theory, now it's a fact.
Right.
And Nancy Pelosi, Congressman Walls, Congressman Bishop, many of them absolutely agreed and said, you're absolutely right. We need to be doing more to get veterans to these other avenues. And, this shouldn't be something that's taking away from the VA. In fact, it's helping the VA because they're extremely overcrowded right now. So if people can be referred by the VA to some other things that might work better for them than the traditional methods, then that's taking some more off of their plate and allowing them to do what they actually are doing.
Yeah, they can't do everything. And we also know that only 28% of veterans go to the VA for service.
Right.
How are we going to, hopefully a lot of those guys and gals don't need any care. And that's the other part of this thing is the more we talk about vets who need help, the more the public gets confused about the fact that every vet is broken or needs our help. Poor vet, but a lot of vets don't. But
Right.
there are some of that, what is it, 72% that for whatever reason just do not go to the VA, and they could be good candidates for some of these alternative treatments and community-based programs that you're talking about.
And I love getting the word out about these things. I mean, I when I was doing the research for your organization, that is the first time I've ever heard of EMDR. And I was a veteran for 10 years. in the Department of Defense for the next 15 years, and I've been in this space, and I've never even heard of EMDR. So my guess is that most other veterans haven't either.
That's one of those things. It's hard to know what level of awareness is out there yet. But yeah, it's one of those, and I don't know who figured out how to name that thing EMDR, but but the other part that I was going to explain earlier is that it's not all eye based. It's actually, when I did it, it was vibrating leads that they would put in each of your hands, and then it would vibrate from one side to the other. So it's really just about getting both hemispheres of the brain active during the session.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I saw on your website you also do services for therapists. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. So what we require to be in our network of EMDR therapists is some cultural competency, so that no matter what your background is, you have some training on what is the culture of the military and of veterans in general, if we can try to generalize such a thing. Right? Like, there are some things that are different about vets. So, just giving them some background about that. And we give a training session. We just did one a few months ago, or actually just a month ago. And it does a lot. It really helps. And it's like, it's as subtle as language, or understanding, like if someone is hyper vigilant, like, how about you just let them sit where they want to sit, and then adjust to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just gives them kind of a frame of reference for doing this work. And it really helps retention rate, I think, a lot, in terms of when you have that first interaction with a veteran, or that first sit down. What are the chances that you did just one thing that you weren't aware of, that could, influence or persuade that person to just drop their trust level just a little bit. And it can cost whether to continue that treatment or not. And so just being aware of some of those things. And it's not like we have some, dictionary on what these things are, but we have some very good therapists who have been in the service and they know the language of therapy, and they know the language of the military. And I think the training's awesome.
That's really good. And that's kind of frightening to think about, that, like, one thing that you do wrong, like, not letting them sit where they want to sit, or saying the wrong thing or something like that, that could completely change their fate.
Yeah.
They could leave out of there and decide never to come back, and maybe that could have been the exact thing that could have helped them.
Yeah. And not to overstate, like, the number of individuals that need, it's not like you should be walking on eggshells. The other part of it is that, hey, be direct also. Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's not like we have to be super careful around, a veteran client, but if there is that one individual, maybe two, whomever, right? But every single opportunity to get them just a little bit past that, what's holding them back is life or death sometimes. And so just to be aware of what those potential, like, mistakes are, I think just gives, I think, probably a higher confidence level for the therapist, so that they can be themselves and do what they do best.
Well, it's great that you offer that.
Thanks, man. I really love this part of it. And there's a paper that I could forward to you to offer to the listeners. It's a cultural competency white paper.
Oh, absolutely. I could put that in the show notes.
Cool, man. It's really good, and it's for everyone. It's from both. It's from civilian side, from veteran side, in the job market. Really doing a nice job of articulating what it is that when there's a bridge that's not meeting in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It defines what those how to think about what's happening there. It's really good.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to getting that. And like I said, I'll definitely put it up in the show notes. So anybody listening to this right now, you can hit the show notes, and at the end, I'm going to tell you exactly where that is, and you'll be able to find that white paper. And I'm going to switch gears here for a second, Paul. You have a podcast also.
Yeah, man, I do. It's called ResilienceMN.
ResilienceMN. Very cool.
Not amen, like MN, like Minnesota.
Got it. Got it. And how long has that been going on?
Well, let's see. I think since maybe February.
Nice.
I don't. So I just published my 10th episode today. I've taken a different route where I don't do strict interview. I actually produce. I produce it sort of like an audio documentary style, like an NPR. And so it takes a little bit more time. But I would say the strategic byproduct of that is that when I go visit with a vet, like I'll go with them. This gal that I interviewed a little while back, she brought me to the gun range. And so we had to hike out there, do some shooting and then go find a spot to do some sit down talking. And I get to know them a little bit better and I get to build trust with them and hope that they understand and trust me. So when they have someone that needs some help, I'm at the top of their mind, and the Veteran Resilience Project is at the top of their mind, because we know that the outreach is really a difficult part of doing this work, and it's a necessary part, and doesn't always. It's really hard to quantify for people, like why you spending so much time doing, a podcast or this sort of outreach. Well, we know that if you don't focus on that, it's not a build it, they will come sort of a deal. So it makes sense for us because we have trauma therapists in 20 different cities across Minnesota. So getting to know those communities and trying to find a vet who wants to share their story, is willing to like host me for an afternoon to get to know who they are and, how the military affected them and just hear their story and have a good conversation like we're doing. That helps so much to do this work. And the other part that's kind of emerged since then is that I've heard from guys that, we don't have a stable funding source yet. So some guys can start right away if they want to go out of pocket or if they have private insurance. And when I get enough money, we raise enough money to get some people off our, list, which I really hate doing that. I have a wait list, but that's just the way it is right now. They've been using some of these podcasts and hearing the stories from, some of their brothers and sisters who've gone through some other shit themselves and what they did to get through it. Like that alone is actually healing.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I heard that, I was like, I just felt really good that I could provide this. And I really enjoy that part of the work and just hearing stories from, you cannot get a better community of folks to get stories from.
Absolutely. That's what we do.
Right.
And the production quality, I listened to the episode with my buddy Javier Matos, and the production quality is outstanding. And I wish that, I had the time and capacity. If I didn't have a day job, maybe I could devote a little bit more time to spending on that. But yeah,
well,
it is great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I did, after business school, I went to audio production and recording school I didn't stay the whole time to get my certificate. I just learned enough to be dangerous.
Nice. Nice. And speaking of Javier, that was really cool to hear him on that episode. He was actually on this. His music was on this podcast, and he was on the Veteran Artist Program podcast, and we kind of moved it from one to the other. And yeah, he's just. It was a great interview with him. He's somebody that I've known for many years, but lost contact with. And I was stationed up in Alaska with him. But he's the guy who introduced me to blues.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was playing in my living room with his steel guitar. and
awesome.
And I was like blown away by how good he was. And because back then he was just another soldier.
Sure.
So
that was before he recorded that album?
Yep, it was before I think right after I left Alaska is when he got signed originally, and but then I think they had to drop him or something because the military wouldn't let him out.
Sure.
So he had to stick around and finish out his tour, and then once he left is when he kind of exploded on the scene, and Yeah, he is so good. But he brought me to a blues bar, which I didn't even know those existed, and and he walked in and everybody knew him, and people were just going up on stage like randomly. Somebody would start playing, and then two other people would jump up, and somebody would start playing a harmonica, and a fiddle or something might come up, and they were just all riffing, out of nowhere, and it sounded as if they were like it was all completely planned. It was just so amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. That sounds like that sounds just like Javier.
Yeah.
The dude's so talented, and he just can connect with people of all walks of life, and just listening to how he tells a story. And it's like I don't know, he's got this Southern sort of drawl that maybe from his Army days,
Yeah.
and then probably from the influence of the blues, like just the words he chooses and the way he paints a picture with his words. It's like he's talented.
Oh yeah, he sure is. And that voice, like.
So you were public affairs with him?
I was actually personnel, but we were both in the housing that was right there on post. I think he was across the street from me or something when we were in Anchorage.
Gotcha.
So we started hanging out. But yeah, it was really cool to start, because I always do my research before I'm getting ready for an interview, and I'm digging through, and I saw the episode with Javier. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. He's in Minnesota.
Well, and he headlined a fundraiser that we had at the Uptown VFW, and he was just going to do solo and volunteer his time for this fundraiser. And then all of a sudden, he gets to call me and he's helping us set up the PA because we just renovated this VFW to have a music room. And so I have no idea if we're going to be able to get the board to get signal from like none of it's set up, and I'm stressing out, and I'm not like preparing stuff. I'm actually lifting speakers. And then Javier gets down there and he gets to setting stuff up by himself. And all of a sudden I see him on his phone, and he comes over. He's like, hey, my band wants to come down and play. I got the best upright bass in the state. He wants to come down. And you wait till you hear my drummer. And pretty soon he's got all those guys down there, and they just, unbelievable, the quality of the music and the energy, of it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they rocked the crowd at our first event for free. And after that event, we got to, release 2 more guys off our wait list to start therapy. It's like the cool thing for me is that some projects have this sort of tenuous connection with the individual that you're helping, or maybe it's like a conceptual thing, like I'm helping this kind of community, but like I know when we do something like that these 2 people, these next 2 names, these vets are going to start down their road of recovery when we're done.
Wow, that's very specific.
Yeah, because we're not doing everything. That's what we do, right? Hey, if we get a referral, we just check very, very basic, DD 214, have a conversation, give them a little bit of understanding who I am and where we're going. And then, all right, where do you live? All right, here's our therapist. Here's the number. Let's get connected to them. And you can move as fast or as slow as you want. But that's about it. We don't have to do all these other projects. That's it. We're not up and running yet. If I get 500 calls after you launched this interview, I'm screwed. I'd be happy. But it's building this momentum and this awareness in our community. But that's like foundations in everyone. It's all, I have to have so many conversations to get them aware of what the need is, why we are here, right? And once I put that all out and I just sit down and get to know them, then it's sort of like, all right, well, let's figure out how we do this. And so we're still in that process. And every piece of awareness from the audience members, if you can go to our Facebook page and like that bad boy, right? Or you
Absolutely.
can go to our website and put your name in there for a newsletter. We'll just give you shout outs when we release episodes, when we have some good news to share. It all helps.
And maybe, when all those people hit you after hearing this podcast, maybe a lot of them will be donating money that will help to offset the new people coming on the list.
That would be great. Time, treasure, or talent. We'll take any T you got.
Nice. And one last question before we get into the final three. Aside from the donations, how can people help your organization?
I would say at this point, it's getting active on our Facebook page. If you're local to Minnesota, then it could be a number of things. We're looking for a sponsor for our podcast. We're looking for companies that want to support greater access to veteran mental health services. So there's that thing that's on our our roadmap, and then connections to foundations and companies that really want to contribute to making a difference and a very quick difference. I mean, I am waiting for someone to step forward, and say, all right, I'm going to give you guys a shot. Here's some chunk of money, and watch what impact we're going to have in our community when we get vets who can turn post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth in a short amount of time. That champion is going to be getting a lot of great visibility. We're getting a ton of media interest, and this sort of thing is whole kind of snowballing. So I'm really looking for a champion in the business community to step forward and be like, this is important to our community, and I want to do whatever we can to impact it. It's, for us, we're not an awareness organization. We give trauma therapy, right? This stuff works, and the awareness is there already. Of course, we can do better on awareness on veteran suicide and PTSD and stuff, but at some point, we just got to get this in veterans' hands. And so we have a system that works, and we can prove it with our data. We just need, I need to break through on one of these foundations. We're on like the final stages of a couple of them, but that's a slow process.
Yeah.
And so we're always looking for help with that. The other part would just be, like going to our Facebook page, interacting with us, liking the page, sharing episodes. Those would all help in enormous ways. So like I said, I mean, if you have the means to make a contribution on our website, it's on the homepage. You can certainly do that. We also need connections, and we also need veterans to understand that EMDR is available. So spread the word in any way you can. It doesn't have to be to our organization. We're in Minnesota. EMDR is going to be everywhere in every community around the states, and it's just starting to grow as well, the number of people who practice it. But get to know this term EMDR because it's really effective. It's helped more than 2 million people around.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It started in Northeast. I think it was Massachusetts back in the 80s. But since then, we've been sending humanitarian aid to disaster areas around the world, and they do EMDR.
Wow.
But, we don't do it.
We don't do it here.
Yeah, with our own. And we need to start. So it's not some experimental, like, kind of risky thing. It's legit. They use it way more in Europe and some other parts of the world than we do even. And it was developed here. And so we're just playing our role, and people are starting to see it as it's drug free, and it's really holistic. It respects the intelligence of the body. It acknowledges our spirit and our soul. And that is a very big driver in healing, as we know. It's not all this brain science, like what's wrong with your brain? No, like there's moral injury, and there's these things that, like, what's going on when our community sends us to do something that tests our moral fiber,
right?
And why are we feeling isolated from our community? Well, I wonder, right? And those are difficult things to address, but EMDR does address those. And so that's one of the things why I was so excited that they were using. The more I learned about it, the more I wanted to help, because it addresses those things like moral injury.
Well, I will be definitely doing my share to spread the word and get the word out to everybody that I can. And I will post your social media and your website and the white paper and put everything in the show notes to try to get people plugged into Veteran Resilience Project and to start spreading the word with EMDR for sure.
Thanks, Jeremy. You're the man.
And I think with that, unless there's anything else I missed, we can get into the final three.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Number one, who would you like to hear on a future episode of the Veteran Resource Podcast?
Well, I'd like to hear Sebastian Junger, because I just read his book Tribe on belonging and homecoming, and I heard him on a couple other podcasts, and he's developed this veteran town hall template for turning your city hall into a veteran town hall on November 11th, where you set up some microphones and some speakers, and you invite the community. And the way he says it, he goes, and on this day, if you say you support the troops, then what that literally means is you're down at your city hall listening to any veteran who wants to go up. They got 10 minutes. There's no discussion. There's no Q&A. It's just listen and give veterans the stand for, one afternoon or whatever.
Wow.
On November 11th. And so
I love that
idea.
Putting them on the spot. I love it.
Yeah, we have to learn somehow from all of these experiences in war, right?
Absolutely. And that's a great way.
So if you go to sebastianjunger.com, he has this veteran town hall tab that has all the specifics, so anyone can go, and have kind of an instruction set for how they would do that in their own community.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to try to get him on the podcast.
Sweet. That guy's awesome.
All right. Question number 2. What upcoming project has you fired up right now?
I was just a part of a great program. The Moth Storytelling
Nice.
workshop came to St. Paul, and I was one of 12 vets that we got to do the workshop work on our veteran experience in the military, and they helped us craft these stories. And so we just had our first performance on Thursday night at a veteran-owned bar in St. Paul, and then over the next 12 months we'll be traveling all around the state of Minnesota.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
And how did people find out about that?
So let's see, it's called the Minnesota Humanities Center. They have a Facebook page that's pretty active, and the website, I think, is mnhum.org. And it's a program. It falls under a program called the Veteran Voices.
Very cool. Okay, last question, and this is the brain stretcher. If you woke up tomorrow and you found out that somebody made an anonymous donation of $10 million to your organization, what would you do with it?
Well, I think I would try to organize. I would figure out a way to scale our project, and in real time communicate to people in other states, so that the work that we're doing in Minnesota is heavy lifting, and we're learning a lot. But sometimes I worry that, am I going to be the only one that knows how to do or is able to do this in Minnesota? And so I want some system so that we can replicate what we're doing here and then ramp up in a short amount of time another system in Montana and one in California. And I think it's possible. And for that amount of money, we could get some designers, and we can get program developers to codify some of the stuff that we just do on a day-to-day basis, and then get some assistance so that we can build it the right way, keeping veteran perspectives and feedback in mind, and not just building stuff, out of the blue, and then have a system that we can replicate this thing for, nationwide.
I would absolutely love to see that. Absolutely. So for the person out there who has $10 million and you're looking for something to do with it,
We know you're out there.
Exactly. We know you're out there. You're trying to figure out where you're going to give that money. You just heard what Paul can do with this, and it is an awesome idea. So for that person with the $10 million or for anybody else who wants to donate, one more time, what is the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so our website is ResilienceMN.org. There is a newsletter field at the top of the page where you can put your email and stay connected to us that way. And then also on Facebook, it's facebook.com/ResilienceMN, or you can email me at paul@ResilienceMN.org.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Paul. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but you are the first episode for season 3. And I am pretty excited about kicking off this new season with this awesome interview.
Thanks a lot, Jim. I appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation.
All right. Thank you so much
for what you're doing, man. Seriously, like what you're doing is really important. And I'm just really happy that I can contribute to it. And maybe, hopefully there may be some collaboration possible when I start digging into some of the organizations you've already covered.
Absolutely. I actually have some ideas of some that might work good for you. So we'll have to talk offline and see if we can get you connected.
Awesome, man.
All right. Thanks again.
You too.
So what did I tell you? That was a great episode, wasn't it? So one of the key points that I want to underline here is that 74% of the veterans that are using EMDR, they no longer qualify as having PTSD. And 100% of the veterans that are using EMDR, they have a significant reduction in symptoms. 100%. Every single person. He also mentioned if you ask for EMDR, they will do their best to try to get you connected to someplace that you can get this provided to you. Maybe they can provide it wherever it is you're getting treatment. Maybe they cannot, but maybe they can at least point you in the right direction. But if you do not ask for EMDR, then you probably aren't going to get it. So pass the word, get this episode out to as many people as you can, and hopefully we can start to see a lot more progress on this. And also, make sure you go to the show notes page at veteranresourcepodcast.com/057, and you'll see all of the links there for Paul and the Veteran Resilience Project, so you can get plugged in, and you can jump into the Facebook group at veteranresourcepodcast.com/community. You can get plugged in. We can start talking about this episode and about EMDR, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions people have, so hopefully as a team we can work together and get them answered. Thank you so much for listening and for passing the word around, and I will see you tomorrow for episode 58.